Hi there, I'm Ken Lammers. This is Commonplace Catholic, and peace be with all y'all. This week, we're going to talk about purgatory. So let's get to it.
Lord Jesus Christ.
युगान युग तेरा ही है.
Ilekroć bowiem sprawujemy pamiątkę ofiary Chrystusa,
Kweli ni vema na haki tukushukuru daima na popote, Bwana Baba mwema.
主の御体と御血になりますように。
Okay, so if you're like me and you're around a lot of Protestants a lot of times, you will hear the two big things about that they will ping you on is Mary, which I don't know what they've got against Mary. No, she's not part of the Trinity, but she does hold a very special space. That's a discussion for another day. And then we get, purgatory. Where do you find purgatory? What is purgatory? Where is purgatory? All this sort of stuff. And I've gone around on this, looking around, trying to figure out exactly what it is. Sometimes you see people in the church kind of backing away from it. I think concerned with kind of placating some of the Protestant sensibilities. But I don't think we should. I mean, we don't exactly know what purgatory is. I've watched one video where a bishop said something to the effect of, look, we don't know if purgatory is 1 second or, umpteen number of years, however long it takes. We just know it is. Right? So, purgatory's there. Now, what is the theory behind purgatory? Why do we think purgatory's there? Well, purgatory's there for people who have lived a life in Jesus, right? In the Trinity and all that, and have done their very best, but pass on with some stain of sin still upon their soul. Not some sin that's so terrible that they're gonna, take the south drain and go down, right? But a sin. So, we've all done that. We all would, you can be the most religious person in the world and have confessed to your priest on Saturday, and you die on Wednesday. Between Saturday and Wednesday, guarantee you've done some sort of minor sin. You got in an argument with somebody in your family. You thought terrible things about somebody, right? Somebody of the opposite sex or whatever walks by and you think terrible things there, right? These things happen, but they're not enough that they're down trained type things. So what happens there? And another thing that I've seen, now this is an explanation I was given once upon a time, is we acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. That's in the creed, right? So you have to be baptized to wash away original sin, right? The sin of Adam. As I say always, it probably should be the sin of Adam and Eve, but it's traditionally been called the sin of Adam. You have original sin in you, and it is to wash that away, make you sinless so you can move forward. So what happens if a child dies before they're baptized, or if somebody's not raised some way? They're raised in a house that believes in Jesus and all that sort of thing, and believes in the Trinity and the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, Athanasius Creed, right? All that good stuff it's on track, but they just don't get their child baptized at birth, and before the child can get baptized, they die. Right, and we're talking that before age of reason at 8, they're not responsible for themselves yet, or even if they are responsible for themselves, they're still stained with original sin. So at that point, do they go straight south? Down? You wouldn't think that would be the way it would go. So you would, the thought process that was put to me was that's purgatory. They'll go there and they get the sins washed, right, in one way or another. And again, what is purgatory exactly? Well, it's where you're cleansed of what remaining sins you have. And how long does that take? We don't know. Could be 5 seconds, could be 5 years, could be 50, 100, 5,000 years, right? But you're cleansed of your sins so that you can go on to heaven. I have seen some assertions, and I'm not sure how this goes, but some assertions that if you have sins still burning in your soul, you would not be able to enjoy the fruits of heaven once you got there because you would be weighed down by the sins while you're surrounded by all the church triumphant, all the people who've made it to heaven, and God and angels and whomever else, and you wouldn't be able to enjoy it. I'm not sure that I follow that rationale 100%, but I do think that you need to be cleansed before you get through. Now let's look at before we get into like the Bible, which is what we always seem to end up back at for my Protestant friends. Here's the Catechism. What the Catechism says: the final purification or purgatory. This is section 1030. All who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their eternal salvation, but after death they undergo purification so as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven. So that's the church's position. There's a little bit more to it if you read the next couple sections too, but that pretty much lays it out right there. So that's the church's position. And let's look at where we get some support from the Bible. And like a lot of things that you go and look for in biblical support, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there, sometimes it's there if you want it to be, right? It's kind of the ontological argument, right? So I'll tell you, the things on your left, my right, are the ones I think that strongly support, right? And the things on your right, my left, are ones where a lot of people, and I mean going back to the early church fathers and that, supported purgatory, right? But the ones on your right, I read through those, and a lot of those, I think it's like the ontological argument, right? And for those of you who don't know, maybe we'll go through the ontological argument for the proof of God sometime in the future. I think it's by Anselm. But the ding on the ontological argument is, you really have to believe, for the ontological argument to work, right? And that's kind of these on your right. I think you have to believe. Now, a lot of them are analogized and that sort of thing, but I think you have to be looking, and you can find support in here, but I think it's confirmation support. And the ones on the left, though, I think are more, for a good solid argument, you can look towards them. And those are the ones I'm going to address today. You can look up the rest if you want to and see, and you may disagree with me. You may think that some of these strongly support the presence of purgatory, the existence of purgatory, but I think the ones on the left are more strong. Now, of course, we've seen the Catechism already, and as a Catholic, I don't need everything to be from the Bible. We get, it's a three-pronged stool. You get the Bible, the magisterium, and tradition, right? So it's a three-pronged stool. It doesn't have to necessarily all be there. So the Catechism is a good way for me to look and see, here's what we believe. But let's go on and look what's in the Bible. And I think what we're going to hit first is Revelations. Revelations 21:27. Nothing that is unclean, no source of corruption or deceit, can ever hope to find its way in. There is no entrance but for those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Nothing unclean can get into heaven. It's not going to happen. And I don't care who you are, unless you are, Saint Francis or somebody or like that, I don't think you're that clean that you're just going to go straight. There's going to be some purification process before you can get into heaven itself. And yeah, and you also have to be on Jesus' book. This is the guy. Read it down here, and he gets in. But you have to be clean before you can get actually into heaven. Then let's look at Micah. Micah 7:9. The Lord's displeasure I must bear, I that have sinned against him, till at last he admits my plea and grants redress. Out into the light he will bring me to find him faithful still. So, the Lord has to have, I have sinned against God and sinned in the world, and that's on me. I have to bear that sin, right? And then he can forgive, right? Now, obviously, again, there's going to be someone who's going to say, I'm saved. At that point, all my stuff's been forgiven. Yes, but you continue to be a human being and act after then. Even assuming that I accept your framework of, saved being the point, instead of going through the sacraments, etc. You've been saved, and then you've got the rest of your life, and you can't tell me you haven't sinned in the rest of your life. So when you die, there's going to have to be something to make that call, right? To cleanse you of whatever sins you still have in your soul. And now we get Maccabees. And you'll recall when we went over the books that Luther and Protestantism took out of the Old Testament, they got rid of, or at least de-emphasized from the Old Testament. They didn't succeed with the ones from the New Testament. Luther didn't. But the Old Testament ones were at the very least de-emphasized, and other than that were out in a lot of Protestant Bibles. But okay, Maccabees, remember I said one of the reasons Maccabees might have been out because they didn't like theological points made in Maccabees. And this is the one I'm talking about, really. There may be others as well, but this is the one that is about praying for the dead, right? 2 Maccabees 12:39 through 46. Now, at the beginning of all this, they go into combat with the Jewish people go into combat with somebody else. I don't recall who off the top of my head. And they win, but they have a bunch of people die. And when they check the dead, they find superstitious items on them from, pagan superstitious items. But they had fallen fighting for God and fighting for the Jewish people. So, they find this, and here's how they reacted to it. And so they fell to prayer, pleading that the sin of the dead soldiers might go unremembered. Then he, the leader, would have contribution made. A sum of 12,000 silver pieces he levied and sent it to Jerusalem, to have sacrifice made there for the guilt of their dead companions. Was this not well done and piously? Here was a man kept the resurrection ever in mind. He had done fondly and foolishly indeed to pray for the dead, if these might rise no more, once they were fallen. And these had made a godly end. Could he doubt, a rich recompense awaited them? A holy and wholesome thought it is to pray for the dead for their guilt's undoing. So this is something that goes hand in hand with the idea of purgatory. You can pray for the dead. You can pray for, your family who's died. You can pray, as you go past a cemetery and you cross yourself and ask God to help everyone in there on their way to salvation. You can pray in several different ways and times for the dead. And you'll do it at church, and you'll do it for people who have died recently in church and that sort of thing. And, the idea is your prayers to God can hopefully help these people who are in purgatory trying to wash themselves free of whatever sins they had and get them toward heaven. So that's what this is about. And again, I don't, I'm pretty sure that a lot of Protestants really don't like that idea. Or the ones I've had conversations with don't seem to be able to get it, or don't seem to like it. And then we get Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 3:11 through 15. The foundation which has been laid is the only one which anyone can lay. I mean Jesus Christ. But on this foundation different men will build in gold, silver, precious stones, wood, grass, or straw. And each man's workmanship will be plainly seen. It is the day of the Lord that will disclose it, since that day is to reveal itself in fire, and fire will test the quality of each man's workmanship. He will receive a reward if the building he has added on stands firm. If it is burnt up, he will be the loser. And yet, he himself will be saved, though only as men are saved by passing through fire. So, this is the purification, right? Okay, we're all based on Jesus, and then we build above that what we do. And if it stands up, it stands up. Amazing. I doubt very many people are that saintly that their building will stand, their life that they've built will stand. But if it doesn't, you still have purification, the fire, which allows you to go forward and enter heaven and be with the Lord, right? So this again would be, okay, there are some people who have built this thing that's so good that they're going to heaven, right? The rest of us have built ours, and it'll be a flame, and it'll be purified. We'll be purified, and then we'll go into heaven, right? So it's, that is kind of pretty much that this is what purgatory is, right? So these are our statements that we have, biblical statements that we have. Does it say, yes, there is a purgatory? There's a lot of things the Bible doesn't say that you have to read through it to find, right? And this is true on either side, right? Does the Bible say that we will forego, going to church on the Sabbath instead to go to church on the Lord's Day, which is what we do? No, it doesn't. There's all sorts of things like that. But in this case, at least, you can read in there and find these supporting passages. Will these convince your absolute hardcore, never think that a Catholic could ever be right about anything, folks? No, it won't. Because anytime people dive into the Bible and start looking, they will always find something that they can use to say, no, it doesn't mean this, he means that. Or other ways to interpret things, even things that are plain in their face. But there it is. Purgatory, it doesn't tell us what's going to happen in purgatory. It isn't like, Dante, of course, wrote Inferno, Purgatorio, and then Heaven, right? I can't remember the actual name of heaven. But Purgatorio is there. Do you think that's actually what purgatory is like? Do you think that, what Dante wrote for the Inferno is actually what hell is like? No, but this is kind of the popular belief of what things are, right? The popular belief is you go to purgatory, you're there for a while, and that would seem to be supported by the fact that there can be prayers for the dead, see Maccabees, and then you pass on to heaven once you've been cleansed of whatever you've done, right? So that's at least partially the case for purgatory. I'm sure there are people out there who can make a much, much better case than I have made, but that's the case as I see it. And that's it for this week, folks. If you do all the Google stuff, right? Hit like if you like it. Hit subscribe. Hit the little bell so you get notified and all that sort of stuff. And as I've said previously, and will always say, I do not have an imprimatur here. There's nobody from the lowest hermit to the Pope that has said, wow, this Ken guy, he's the guy who should be, arguing all this sort of stuff. He's almost like Thomas Aquinas. Nobody's going to make that mistake. But on the other hand, obviously, as I say almost every week, the Inquisition hadn't shown up at my door either to tell me, hey, you need to shut this down. You're in dangerous territory. So, there it is for you, folks. I invite you to go hunt down and look these things up yourself. Don't look at me as the final word. I'm not. I'm not part of the magisterium, right? I'm not, I'm definitely not part of tradition. Well, I am part of tradition. I'm in the Catholic Church. But it is to you to look to these things. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. But you should look. And with that, folks, go in peace, and I'll see you next week.